Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Naga Manchetti and Charlie State.
Our headlines today: a half-hearted approach that risks failing hundreds of thousands of pupils. The damning verdict of the government's top education advisor as he quits in a row over funding.
50 days to go until the start of the Tokyo Olympics. Organisers insist it won't be cancelled or delayed despite a surge in coronavirus cases across Japan.
Good morning. Will more countries get the green light this summer? The so-called green list of holiday destinations will be updated later, meaning we can travel without having to quarantine. So what are the possibilities and what could it mean for the travel industry?
Good morning. A win for England, but at what cost? Trent Alexander-Arnold limps off during England's friendly with Austria, with Kaya Saka giving them the win. Scotland drew with the Netherlands and Wales lost in France.
And out come the bride and groom.
One of the world's most famous wedding dresses, the gown worn by Princess Diana, goes on display for the first time in 25 years.
Diana, with that dress, was really declaring herself on the world stage. She was a rule breaker. She was going to be a fashion icon.
Good morning from the roof of Broadcasting House. Yesterday, we had the warmest day of the year so far. The temperature in London reached 28 degrees. Today, it'll be cooler for most of us. It's a cloudier start with a few showers, but it should brighten up as we go through the course of the morning. I'll have all the details later in the programme.
Good morning, it's Thursday the 3rd of June. I made a story this morning. The man appointed by Boris Johnson to help pupils in England make up for lost learning during the pandemic has resigned in a row over funding.
Sir Kevan Collins said that the £1.4 billion which was allocated to the scheme fell far short of what was needed. Simon Jones has more.
After months of classroom closures due to coronavirus, schools are now playing catch-up.
Excellent. And what's the word we would have?
But that will need extra cash. And the government's Education Recovery Czar says there simply isn't enough of it. In a resignation statement, Sir Kevan Collins said he'd asked for landmark investment, but instead, ministers had chosen a plan that is too narrow, delivered too slowly. One that falls far short of what's needed. He adds, a half-hearted approach risks failing pupils.
The astonishing thing is that the Prime Minister hired him to do a job knowing the kind of report he would produce. When he produces it, the Prime Minister just throws his hand up and says no. It's really, really important to realise that there are parts of this country that will suffer because of this, because parts of the north of England have had schools that have been closed for double the amount of time that other parts of the country, particularly in the south, have done.
The government had announced an extra £1.4 billion over 3 years for tutoring and teacher training. Sir Kevan is reported to have wanted 10 times that.
This is not the end of announcements for what needs to be done to support this generation of young people. They've been through an immensely disruptive time, which has affected different children, different young people in different ways. And the government is committed, I believe, to doing what it takes to address that. We haven't yet had the comprehensive spending review. And when we do, we will hear more about what those plans are.
Put it here.
The government says it will continue to focus on education recovery to make sure no child is left behind with their learning, insisting more money is on the way. But Sir Kevan says what's on offer so far does not come close to meeting the scale of the challenge. Simon Jones, BBC News.
Well, let's speak to our chief political correspondent, Adam Fleming now. Morning to you, Adam. So we're looking for what response there's been, really, to what's happened. On one moment, we have someone lauded for what they're going to bring to the table, and now he's gone. So what's been the reaction?
Yeah, so Downing Street put out a statement yesterday evening shortly after Sir Kevan Collins' resignation, thanking him for his service to the country and pointing out that they've already committed a hefty £3 billion to this catch-up programme, which is not an insignificant amount of money. It's just not significant enough for Sir Kevan, who was asking for something like £10 billion so that the school day could be extended for every pupil in England by an average of half an hour a day. But it turns out that was just too much for the Treasury, who have said that they wanted to see more evidence that it would work and spend a bit more time looking at the plans, and also to fold it into this comprehensive spending review, which will be done in the autumn, which will look at all the spending done by all the government departments. But nevertheless, this is a personal prime ministerial priority to help children catch up after all the lockdowns. And no prime minister likes their personal priority policy being described as too slow, too narrow, too small, or half-hearted. Although there is just a little caveat to this. Boris Johnson's obsession with all of this is the tutoring programme. The tutoring programme got an extra £1 billion yesterday. Boris Johnson doesn't appear to have a view on whether the school day should be extended. So actually, maybe this isn't such a huge clash between the Prime Minister and the Treasury and the Education Tsar as we might expect. But it'll be fascinating to see how this debate plays out in the next few months. And do we end up with a longer school day, or in a couple of months do we just see more money given to the tutoring programme?
Adam, thank you very much.
The organisers of the Tokyo Olympics have ruled out a cancellation or another postponement of the Games amid a surge in COVID infections in Japan and a state of emergency in the capital.
10,000 volunteers have already pulled out over concerns about rising COVID cases and a slow vaccination rollout. Here's our Tokyo correspondent, Rupert Wingfield-Hayes.
This is sport in the time of COVID. Fans may clap, but cheering is forbidden. Masks are mandatory, and so are temperature checks. It's Sunday night in Kawasaki, and the football fans heading into this stadium are now used to the routine. And despite a new wave of COVID raging across Japan, here it all feels very relaxed.
I'm going to take all prevention measures we can take, and we'll be watching the game away from other fans.
Inside, just 5,000 spectators are allowed.
They've been holding football matches like this in Japan with audiences throughout the COVID pandemic, and they say they can do so safely because everybody wears masks, because of the safety measures that they've put in place, and they say they have not had one single cluster of COVID traced back to any of these games since the beginning of the pandemic.
All this is evidence to support the Olympic Committee's latest mantra, which is repeated at every opportunity.
We will be able to deliver a safe and secure games for everyone. These games will be able to be staged in a safe and secure manner. We'll be able to deliver a safe and secure games this summer.
But safe and secure is not how it feels in the emergency ward at the Juso Hospital in Osaka. The last month has been exhausting for staff here, with more COVID patients than ever before. The International Olympic Committee says events like this show that going ahead with the Olympics can be done with minimal risk. But in a country where 95% of people remain unvaccinated, the question many here are asking is, why is the IOC so determined to take that risk? Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News, in Kawasaki.
Well, let's talk to Rupert now, who's in Tokyo. Rupert, morning to you. Hello to you. 50 days to go. And usually these are days of, excitement. These are monumental markers, aren't they? But there are problems mounting and questions still being asked.
Very much so, Nagai. You can see behind me here, this is the Olympic rings that are out on a barge in Tokyo Bay, and you can see construction workers behind me, maybe. This is one of the Olympic venues for the open water swimming and the triathlon on the beach behind me here. So, it is full speed ahead here in Tokyo. It feels like there is now a frenetic activity to get everything ready, get all the stadiums ready, get all the preparations for all the checks and all the, the security and biosecurity that's going to be needed in order to hold this safely, as the IOC says it will be. But as you say, it is still extremely controversial here. Not only have we had 10,000 volunteers resign in the last, we learned yesterday, but we've also heard from one of the senior advisors to the Japanese Prime Minister, Shigeru Omi, one of the designers of Japan's COVID strategy, who yesterday in Parliament said going ahead with the Olympics during the pandemic is not normal. And that is just adding to the voices of scientists, doctors and the general public here who are saying, look, a pandemic is still, this is not a post-Olympics pandemic. This is a pandemic in the middle of this is an Olympics in the middle of a pandemic. And is that really a wise thing to be doing? Japanese government says yes, the IOC says yes, and we understand the Japanese Prime Minister will next week in Cornwall ask for the support of the G7 nations at their summit there in the UK in a statement to support Japan going ahead with the Olympic Games.
Rupert, thanks so much. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes there, our Tokyo correspondent.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.